Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Okay, I just want to set up the framing again of where I think we are today, which is 1 week from the morning after Election Day. The question here is, will we know by this time next week who's been elected president? The voting will, the vote counting will probably be continuing, so we may not. And I think that's an important element of the story today. I believe the story continues to be the road to 270 and the electoral map and the puzzle of how these two candidates get there. I think we did an excellent job yesterday, really strong throughout the day and throughout the evening of focusing on that. Just because we did it yesterday, let's not back off just because we did it. Let's stay on that storyline. And I do think that, as we'll hear from David and Virginia, the idea that the White House says that they ended the pandemic is one of the craziest things we've heard in this crazy year, and I think should be the subject of tremendous focus for us today. In addition, one other storyline that I think that we should try to get at, which is that Democrats feel so burned by what happened in 2016. They refuse to believe that they have a chance of winning here, and that the map looks better for them today. We don't know what will happen, but the PTSD of the Democrats, I think, is a palpable story, and we should try to get at that as well. David Chalian, let's start with politics, please.
Good morning, Jeff. I'm just going to start at sort of 30,000-foot level for a moment because of you, as you've been talking this week, the convergence of the two major stories of the election and COVID. I just think it's because it is so omnipresent. I mean, over this last month, the virus has just closed in on the president in a really substantial way. Obviously, his own illness, two COVID clusters in the White House, but he is campaigning through these states at this time when the virus is on such an uptick, and his worst sort of position throughout this entire year of this campaign since the virus hit, basically, or shortly after, when his mismanagement of it became clear, has been his mismanagement of the virus. And I just want to think back for a moment to this year of where Donald Trump finds himself 6 days out, because he tried in the spring to just open the economy at all costs. He just said everyone should get their kids back to school, no matter not paying attention to how you do that safely. He then used the largest racial protest for racial justice in this country that we've seen in decades to try and turn the national conversation to law and order. He also did that at his convention when the summer surge of the virus was coming to a close. He tried. It hasn't worked. The virus has consumed everything for him and his mismanagement of it, and that has actually happened more aggressively in this final month of the campaign. And I just think that, we should be layering both stories together as much as we can. So with that, I just want to start with the voting numbers, and I know Virginia will have more, but we are now, as you saw last night, past the point where 50% of the total 2016 electorate has already voted. We see that we're 70 million plus people who've already cast their vote. I mean, by the time we get to Monday before the election, that could be 100 million, and we can see such a dramatic discrepancy when all the votes are tallied between those who voted early and pre-election day and those who actually showed up on the polls on election day, just like we've never seen those two portions of the electorate skew the way that they are right now. you had mentioned the map and the path to 270. The state in the focus on that today is clearly Arizona. That's where the campaign trail converges from both the Biden side and the Trump side. For Trump, it's he himself, the president, doing two events in Arizona today. For the Biden campaign, it's Kamala Harris, the vice presidential nominee, who will be doing two events, one in Tucson, one in Phoenix, in Arizona today. This state where, has been reliably Republican in presidential contests other than when Bill Clinton won it in 1996, and it has been a decade-long project for the Democrats to try and flip this state blue, and that is the sort of center of the map today in terms of where the campaign trail activity converges. Kyung La is there, and we'll be able to take a look at battleground Arizona. We do have our brand new CNN exclusive final pre-election national poll. I know we don't pay attention a ton to national polls at this stage of the game when you're doing the road to 270, but 6 days out, this is sort of that final pre-election snapshot of the country's mindset on this race and on the pandemic. And we are awaiting our final numbers, but I expect it's going to look like you've seen the national polls elsewhere looking, which is to say a stable race without any significant narrowing of the race at the moment. The David Wright note last night, I want to call everyone's attention to about some of the late strategic TV ad spending shifts that the Trump team has been doing here in the last day, for the final week here. They're de-escalating thereby in a place like Florida, a net loss of some $2 million on the air there, and they're just getting hammered by Team Biden, and then that's getting doubled by Michael Bloomberg on the air in Florida. But they're actually taking money out of Florida, and they are upping their bets in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona in terms of spending on TV in this final week because they've got to lean their muscle into that as much as they can, because just winning Florida, they can't. That's not going to solve this for them. They've got to get some of that 2016 map back in place for him. So interesting to look at how the ad dollars are shifting. The brand new polls from Wisconsin and Michigan out of ABC News, Washington Post. Again, you see big Biden leads in both of these Great Lakes states that were part of that so-called blue wall that Joe Biden this week said he must reconstruct. The Wisconsin poll does not look like anything else we've seen out of Wisconsin, with a 17-point lead, 57-40 for Biden. We'll get another Wisconsin poll today from Marquette. We'll see some other Wisconsin polling in the days to come, and we'll see if ABC, Washington Post sort of caught a front-end wave of that, or if it is an outlier of sorts. Nonetheless, Jenna Jesta in our system that every show producer can pull just automatically has a constantly updated poll of polls in the key battleground states. And so just because that poll doesn't quite look like others, I would not highlight that poll individually on our air. I would use the averages that exist in the system in the battleground states. You saw the reporting from Jeff Zeleny and others that Obama is going to join Biden this weekend on the campaign trail. So obviously we've seen the former president offering his scathing review of his successor in the Oval Office. 3 stops now that he's done for the Biden campaign. This time they will join forces, and he'll appear with his vice president, who is now the Democratic nominee, this weekend. I also want to note the Omaha event last night. Apparently, as Jeff Zeleny was there and reporting, after Air Force One left, there were tons of stranded folks, many of them older folks. It was cold. The buses that dropped them off were not able to come in fast enough to pick them up and get them out. They didn't know where to go. When the buses finally arrived, a lot of people were getting on without masks. It's just to note that this is not the kind of local news coverage you're going to want. It's a lingering story out of this trip that you made to try and win a single electoral vote because of the current state of where you find your campaign. So I do think that's an interesting sort of tale T-A-I-L, to the president's trip there. You saw that the Trump website was defaced for about 30 minutes, apparently by folks looking for cryptocurrency. Obviously, there is real concern in both the Trump and Biden campaigns about all things cybersecurity. You saw the campaign put out a statement saying nothing was taken, there was no harm done, but they've, have the FBI investigating and what have you. So they have reported it to authorities. One other thing I just wanted to note about those polls out this morning from the Great Lakes states, we again see, and I'm sure we'll see it again in our national poll this afternoon, just how much women are powering Joe Biden's lead in this race at the moment. And so it just makes it all the more sort of odd that the president of the United States would say a line like he did yesterday in Michigan about, promising women that he's going to get their husbands back to work. I know Richard will have more from a business perspective of the facts and figures behind women in the workforce, but just politically, when you are, perhaps your own words explain to you why you're having a problem, a significant electoral problem with women in this race at the moment. You had noted, I will leave to Virginia to go through the White House's press release, but to me, that is very much part of where I started this, with just how much this virus and the mismanagement of it and the communication around it has closed in around the president. I think that's where we start.
Right, I agree. So I think that's what I was trying to say, and I think you captured it perfectly. This is, everything has come together, and no matter what the Trump campaign has tried, whether it was law and order, Democrat-run cities, Hunter Biden, at the end of the day, this is the coronavirus election, and it has all come together this week as the October, not really a surprise, is that coronavirus is back with a vengeance. Washington.
Okay, so as we see him go from state to state in these states that are really badly hit by COVID, as you pointed out, this inexplicable statement that was issued from the administration last night about the administration's accomplishments ending the COVID pandemic. This obviously, as you will hear from Matthew, flies completely in the face of reality. We are now at 70,000 cases a day, and at an incredible tipping point. And the concept that they could issue that is just head spinning. There's a couple of other, the other obvious story out of here that is so important is these voting numbers. David did the top lines on them, but digging deeper into those numbers, 18 states have crossed the halfway point, including 16 of the ones that CNN has as the most competitive. These early voters are younger, more diverse, more likely to be Democrats. Tim and Kristen have a story out either now or shortly about how the specifics of Pennsylvania and how different counties vote, count their votes differently, and that's just such an important state. The president, for his part on all of this, is continuing to call the results for the results on Election Day. He claims that additional ballots will get debited to the ballot count. And then there's a lot of legal wrangling going on as well. We have these two cases that are pending in front of the Supreme Court, this on expanding the voting in Pennsylvania, and this North Carolina case. We have last night Texas upholding this policy that limits each county to a single drop box. And then there's additional ones we have obviously the Wisconsin one earlier this week, and Nevada and Michigan, where yesterday a conservative judge overturned the rule that people could carry unconcealed guns at polling places on Election Day. So there's just a lot on the legal side too. And I think that just a couple other notes from Washington, new reporting on Trump's taxes, and this focuses on his Chicago properties, and how he failed to repay $287 million in loans. And Jamie Gingo has some new Woodward reporting coming at noon today, so she'll have that later today. And I think that's what I got.
And Jeff, I just forgot to mention. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Dave. Go ahead.
Just the time we're going to see Biden today in Wilmington is 12:15 when he will finish his health briefing and make remarks about COVID and protecting people's health care. We do see Biden in Wilmington at 12:15.
Okay. Again, I want to stay focused today on the election, Trump and Biden, the road to 270, and coronavirus and the politics of coronavirus. That's really where our focus should be. Everything else to me is just a sideshow at this point. I do think before we turn it over to Matthew, and I'll open it up, the other thing that I think, besides the White House list of accomplishments of ending the pandemic, which I think needs to be just, exposed for what it is, you have Admiral Girard today completely contradicting Trump, saying that we can control the virus. Actually, also Mark Meadows, but saying we can control the virus. We know how to do that. And the cases are going up, and it's not just a matter of testing. I think it's really important that we highlight Girard's complete contradiction of Trump and Meadows. Okay, before we move to coronavirus and everything that's going on with that, and Matthew, let's open it up for thoughts on the election and Trump, Biden, White House. Anyone with thoughts?
Hey, Jeff, it's David on the legal issue.
Yep.
There's a good op-ed in the Times today, amongst others. Neil Katyal wrote it. But I really think it does a nice job of framing this Kavanaugh/Thomas approach to state legislatures and state Supreme Courts, and how really just aggressive it is, and how there's nothing conservative or originalist about it. It's long been a rule that the state Supreme Court is the ultimate arbiter of what the state Constitution says. And now the U.S. Supreme Court will insert its own judgment when it sees fit. That's the opposite of what Amy Coney Barrett was just testifying to for the past couple of weeks. And it's pretty radical.
Yep. Okay. Other thoughts? Anyone else?
Yeah, Jeff. I wanted to raise the issue regarding the possibility of someone or some show doing a story about the long list of voter suppression support on the red side versus open and access on the blue side. And it's very hard to find any example of Republicans or their supporters, or even their so-called supporters in the courts, citing for more open access to voting, even through what we saw in Wisconsin. And I think it would be an interesting piece to talk about why has that happened, and cataloging maybe 5, 8, 10 examples of where it's just what and why the conservative Republican side seems to want fewer people voting than more people voting. And we saw it again in Texas, once again, where the drop box ruling came down, so there still can only be one box per county in Texas again after an appeal. It just seems head-scratching why they would want to make it harder rather than easier to vote.
I mean, Rick, this is John Avalon. I mean, the reason to go back to Reconstruction and Richard Viguerie and the post-civil rights era, I mean, it's pretty clear there's continuity here, unfortunately. But to that end, I actually wanted to flag one thing as just a question. how are we covering and measuring slowdown of mail-in, but reported slowdown of mail around mail-in ballots? I saw NBC did a big thing. There's no reason to take Joy's word for it, it seems to me. Could be a big issue.
Hey, this is Paul Murphy. I've been looking at USPS for a while. So the last numbers we have is that there was a slight decrease, but it wasn't as big as there was in earlier in October and late September. But I will say, to USPS's credit, they are really going above and beyond to try and get the mail out, specifically the ballots. So I know that NBC and others have done that, but I just feel like they're kind of taking some slight hits and they're blowing it out of proportion.
Yeah, I was going to note that we should do an update on how the post office is doing. I'm interested in all of that, and because we spent so much time a couple of months ago on what were they doing to, I'm going to put it in quotation marks, sabotage, or was there a conspiracy on somehow on the Trump side as to whether or not the post office was going to mess up the election. So I do think an update on the post office this week would be interesting. But I think even more importantly is, and we've been doing this, but I think we should be doing this regularly, is just updating everybody on when does early voting end in particular states? What do they have to do to get ballots in at this time? Or obviously their other alternative is to wait until Tuesday to vote. Is there still time to mail them in? What are the rules? Is there opportunities to put them in drop boxes? And I know obviously we've had lots of issues with drop boxes, like in California, et cetera. But can you just drive up and put it in a drop box? And even if in Harris County, Texas, you live, an hour and a half away from the drop box. I think telling people like in this countdown to Tuesday, what their options are for continuing to vote, when the deadlines are, some states end early voting, I think, on Friday, others on Saturday, some take it through Monday. I think that's really important as we continue to deliver our message about vote, vote, vote. Whoever you're voting for, you should be voting. I think we should also be giving people constant updates on what the options are and what they can do to make sure that their ballot is received and counted.
Just on the USPS part of that, because of a court order yesterday, we are going to be able to do that story specifically on the USPS because every single day, I believe at 3 p.m., they're going to have a court meeting that we can call into where they give daily updates on what the mail is like every single day from now, I think through Election Day. So we'll be able to, we'll have more input on that later.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yes, one other thing, Jeff, it's Liza. We're going to concentrate, obviously, for that White House list of accomplishments on coronavirus. But also on that list, an issue many people care desperately about, the White House says it has protected the environment for generations to come. Just worth a tagline at least.
Okay. Speaking of that list, it's a reminder of George W. Bush's mission accomplished, and I think an appropriate parallel there. And we know what happened to him on that. Anybody else before we move to more on COVID? Matthew, on COVID.
So obviously, Jeff, all signs pointing to an even deeper crisis as cases surge, even deaths now beginning to rise again. Yesterday was one of the highest case days ever. Over 73,000 cases, nearly 1,000 reported deaths. For the first time, the average of new daily cases is over 70,000. And for the first time, we added more than 500,000 cases in a week. Ashish Jha telling Wolf he believes we're on track for 100,000 cases a day in the coming weeks. So inevitably, following weeks of rises in cases and hospitalizations, we're now seeing signs deaths are rising. Daily deaths up almost 8% in the last month. over 800 now. This month, 11 states reporting their highest day for death reports ever. And the dire language coming from state leaders around the country is really something. Obviously, Wisconsin's governor, an urgent crisis, imminent risk to you and your family. Mike DeWine, the surge is noticeably sharper and steeper this time. And New Jersey's governor, the latest numbers are sobering. And just to underscore, we talked a little bit about this, but the division, the competing realities, the lack of national unity around the facts, it's as baffling as ever as the numbers are worse than ever. Obviously, the president mocking COVID. Obviously, as you mentioned, Jeff, his testings are contradicting his and Meadows' claims as recently as this morning. And all these governors sounding new alarms, but South Dakota's governor touting freedom from restrictions in her state, a state that is almost the worst per capita in the nation. Okay, so looking at the CNN map, 40 states going in the wrong directions in weekly cases, all the battlegrounds for sure. In Wisconsin, where Pence heads today in a life and death battle with COVID there, over 5,000 cases reported yesterday, a huge number, possibly the worst. The state's chief health officer says it's a nightmare scenario. Frankly, could get a bit worse in the next several weeks before it gets better. Wisconsin crossed 200,000 total cases, 100,000 of them coming just in the last month alone. The governor calling on Wisconsin residents to stay home on their own and avoid gatherings, even as the courts strike down his power to restrict that on his end. And we've got Adrian Broadus at that field hospital near Milwaukee. Illinois, an example of one of the many places returning to restrictions, the state ordering an end to indoor dining and bar service in Chicago. Ohio's governor says ICU admissions have doubled in October, and DeWine warns that if they don't aggressively fight this, they will be shut down because the spread will be so bad. Basically, the entire Northeast red on our map. Connecticut up 50% week to week. Vermont, which had kept numbers very low for a long time, now says it has started to experience multiple simultaneous outbreaks. Massachusetts, the governor pointing to cases surging among the young, calling out the behavior of young people and gatherings. And of course, Ed Lavandera in El Paso, which is an incredible story unto itself because of the hospital strain. An overflow hospital will soon be set up at the Civic Center there. From the health front, we are not at all far from final vaccine trial results, but not before the election, it seems. Pfizer says efficacy results will come soon, but then it'll be at least a week until they're released to the public. So past the election, obviously. A team of Oxford experts. It might not be clear which vaccines work best and how well they work and for how long until it's already authorized and already given to the masses. It'll just take that long to see the impact on large numbers of people. And several states, Washington, Oregon, Nevada, joining the California plan for independent state reviews of any vaccine, even after the feds authorize, just underscoring the suspicion about the vaccine process here. And finally, in the category of unpleasant but fascinating, researchers finding traces of coronavirus in sewage in cities like Boston and Tempe, Arizona. Not a good sign, signaling an increase, large numbers of people shedding the virus. It's an early indicator that's been used and is pretty reliable. We've got Sanjay and Elizabeth and Jacqueline Howard available from Health. And then, of course, in a World Series moment perfect for 2020, the pandemic putting a cloud over the Dodgers' big celebration last night. Justin Turner pulled from the field after a positive test, but then returning to the field to celebrate. Leaving the team's return home and quarantine status in doubt. Testing underway today, so we'll track that. And we've got the wrap piece, which is Nick Watt today for 3, 5, 7, and 9.
Great. Thank you. Okay, does anybody have anything they want to discuss about COVID? Okay, international.
Hey, Jeff. So today we're closely watching what could be a really big development out of Europe. We're waiting to hear from Macron and Merkel in press conferences today, something that seemed unthinkable even a week ago. There's some indication that the idea of a new lockdown in France and very heavy restrictions in Germany are being considered. So Europe's largest countries potentially giving into COVID and having to adhere to the types of restrictions they've been trying to avoid. So we won't get too far out ahead of that, but I did just want to lay down the marker disclaimer, and our reporters will give the right caveat and context as we quote state media and such. So Melissa Bell is going to be available on the France side till 11. Then Jim Bitterman will pick up. Macron speaks at 3 p. Eastern, so that's when we'll hear from France. And then Scott can cover the German angles, and Merkel is speaking at 4 p. today. So I just wanted to highlight all of that. We also have a couple of pieces of content which underline the mood in Europe today, essentially weariness and anger. In Italy, Wiedemann continuing to cover the protests across that area where we're including from the far right as the country recorded its highest one-day increase since the beginning of the pandemic. An NPW package takes us inside an overwhelmed UK ICU ward in a city that just had their worst weekend. And meanwhile, the public seems now to be taking out their anger on members of the medical community and ignoring COVID rules. And then just last for us on COVID today, Matt Rivers has a whip on the mayor of Mexico City testing positive as the country records the fourth highest COVID case count and death toll. So we do have a couple of other stories going on. The only one I'll highlight outside of COVID is just the Turkish government condemning a series of cartoons published by the French magazine Charlie Hebdo mocking Erdogan. So that's fanned the flames of that conflict this morning, and now they're announcing a new legal investigation into it all. And Arwa has that report. So that's where we start.
Thank you very much. Business.
Jeff, good morning. U.S. stock futures falling sharply this morning following an increase of coronavirus cases. There's fear that the economic recovery is halting. And, of course, we have no stimulus on the horizon to save the economy. Dow futures are down well over 600 points and falling. Christine Romans and Alison Kosik available on that. One other thing weighing on the Dow this morning, the largest components in the Dow, Boeing. Boeing CEO David Calhoun saying the company does not expect normal airline traffic for another 3 years, and they aim to have a staff of 130,000 by the end of 2021. That's a 10% reduction from current levels, or about 7,000 jobs less. And obviously, this comes after the company reported third quarter earnings this morning. Pete Muntean is available on that. Jeff, we're also highlighting that comment that David mentioned, that backward-looking and tone-deaf remark as the president was appealing to suburban women, promising to get their husbands back to work if reelected. Fact is, 617,000 women were left out of the workforce in September alone. The IMF warning that the pandemic recession hurting women more than men. They lost more jobs at the start of the pandemic and continuing to lose more jobs, currently, especially since no stimulus is in sight. As one economist noted this morning, women are the shock absorbers in this pandemic economy. Christine Romans has been up on that as well. And lastly, in non-COVID news, all eyes are on the Hill today, where the CEOs of Facebook, Twitter, and Google are set to be grilled in a Senate hearing at about 10 o'clock. Ostensibly, this is about Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. This shields tech companies from liability for what users post on their platforms. Both Biden and Trump want to get rid of Section 230, but obviously for many different reasons. And of course, much of the focus this morning will be on what O'Neill Sullivan calls the man who has repeatedly been wrong and who will tell Congress that he is right. That is Mark Zuckerberg. In 2016, Zuckerberg denied that Facebook influenced the 2016 election. In 2018, he defended Holocaust deniers for their right to post on Facebook. And of course, after that outrage, he admitted he was wrong in both cases, but expect him to defend Facebook's decision today for not fact-checking ads from politicians. That is something Democrats will bring up. And obviously, the Republicans will bring up how Facebook tried to reduce the distribution of that unsubstantiated New York Post story about Hunter Biden. So we have Brian Fung and O'Neill Sullivan available on all of those threads. And that's where we begin today.
Okay, thank you. Before we move to digital, does anybody have anything else they want to bring up?
Hey, Jeff, I just want to give a quick word about Hurricane Zeta strengthening, just noting this is a bigger deal this morning than when we talked about it yesterday. We're now likely looking at a Category 2 hitting New Orleans this afternoon and evening, a fast-moving storm, life-threatening storm surge. We've got Amara Walker in New Orleans, Best Pictures behind her, likely for DC and Prime shows, and of course, Chad, Jennifer, Tom in the Weather Center, and we've got Bryn in Philadelphia as police comb through evidence after another night of unrest, mostly peaceful, some scattered violence and looting in the Walter Wallace Jr. shooting case.
Okay. Thank you, Matthew. Anyone else?
Hey, Jeff, it's Rebecca. I just want to piggyback on some of the conversation around women. And one of the things that I think we could give a little more attention to in the coming days. We've talked so much about Kamala Harris as a breakthrough candidate for African American women, which is certainly true, and their political strength, and that's all been fantastic, and we should do more of that. But I think there's also a really great conversation about just what it means for women, just women full stop, and little girls and all of that. And we did that around Hillary. And this would, again, if they win, this would be a breakthrough for all women. And I think we haven't talked about that part of it enough because we've been rightfully focused on what it means for women of color. But I think all women are seeing this candidacy as maybe a second chance for women to get someone in there. And it's just a different way to frame it that I think will have very broad appeal.
Great. We should absolutely do that. Anybody else? Okay, digital.
Hey, good morning. 30 million uniques yesterday. The top story was top Senate seats likely to flip. Kavanaugh foreshadowing how the court could disrupt vote counting and the maximum sentence. This morning, this is a terrific story. It's in P1, our top spots on mobile and desktop. Everyone check it out. Trump's economy in 10 charts compared to other presidents. This is Annalyn Kurtz and Tal Yellen in business. It is just clear, scannable, just really terrific data points. It's number one at 11,000 concurrents. The tax record showing that Trump had over $270 million in debt forgiven after failing to repay lenders. That's the New York Times, and that's our aggregation of their story. That's number two. Trump's frenetic push in states that highlight his COVID denial is Collinson at number three. Why deaths aren't rising as fast in the second wave in U.S. and Europe despite huge spikes in new infections. That's in our top five. And the only non-election, non-COVID story in the top five is our latest and from Philadelphia, with police asking residents to stay indoors and wrapping up what happened last night. So there is a lot of audience interest still in Philadelphia. The top videos are watching Trump's history of refusing to release his tax returns. That's our number one on desktop. On the app, it's Acosta asking Trump if he blew it on COVID. And then on mobile web, it's Brianna on how Lindsey Graham has been asking for money on Fox and her rolling the tape. A handful of other things on COVID. Our frame for our main bar today is more than half the states reported their highest day of new cases this month. We have some great pieces from Health, including Elizabeth, on why bold early predictions about a vaccine have not come true, and where we are in antibody treatments from Jen Christensen. Business has a great piece. The headline is, we asked how the pandemic changed your money habits, and here's what you said. This is a result of a direct audience call out, which we're going to be doing a lot of those. And then the NPW piece coming on British doctors facing abuse as cases soar and pandemic fatigue sets in. That's about to publish on digital right now, so we're going to make a big deal out of that. And then, as Penny said, we will stay tight on what happens in France and Germany, because that's a big deal. On the road to 270, we have a lot of strong pieces. There's one that just went up from Harry on how Arizona complicates Trump's bid. So we're doing a lot of those just, micro state-specific takes that are really strong. And then I just want to remind people that, we've got in our election center our 270 maps, including, of course, CNN's own 270 map. But we also have the ability for audiences to make their own map from scratch, to see and play with different scenarios on your own. So you're going to see us giving a lot of attention to that across digital platforms from here forward. On voting, 6 days until the election, here's what we know about who's voted so far in key states. We're just going to do this every day. We also have an interactive that we've updated on when ballots will be processed. We're focusing on Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. We also have a separate piece on how to track your mail-in ballot. So yes to that whole discussion on just making sure that audiences are clear on what is known and then how this all works. And then just 100%, Richard nailed it on Trump's attempt to woo suburban women. We're going to do that separate piece on pulling on that. Women have been the shock absorbers of the pandemic economy. I mean, it's not just that Trump is, saying the thing about getting husbands back to work, treating everything like it's 1952. It's like he's not fundamentally understanding who's been mostly affected by the pandemic in terms of gender. We are on the tech CEO staying in front of the Senate today. We are not going to DLE it because of the high likelihood that it will be a political circus. And so we're just going to update it and do some analysis pieces and pull the right clips. But we are going to take our time with that and watch it carefully because it just seems like it's going to be a little bit of a shit show. And then data, of course, that's in our top 10 and will rise. The California wildfires we will stay on, and more on Walter Wallace and being on the ground in Philadelphia. That's it.
Okay. Thank you. John?
All right. So both candidates have events today, and it's still all about COVID. Jeremy Diamond's in Arizona, where Trump heads there for a rally mid-afternoon, really landing on the White House taking credit for ending the pandemic and calling that out. And then MJ Lee in Wilmington, where we see Biden get this COVID briefing from the health officials, and then he'll make remarks. That's going to be during the noon hour, so we'll take that and land on that as well. Brianna does have Dr. Rick Bright, the whistleblower, all about Trump's Orwellian spin of the pandemic. Dana Bash, Ron Brownstein, and David Gergen to stay on that theme. The early voting records being smashed in all these key swing states. We are live in 6 of them today. Every show is building out whips. We'll be with in Florida, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina throughout the day. John King continues his road to 270 Magic Wall hits. Also, he's putting a big focus on Michigan and Wisconsin with 2 local political reporters from each state to really get that ground level perspective. Jessica Huseman from ProPublica on all the different voting threads, what the early voting numbers tell us, the Texas ruling with Governor Abbott. On coronavirus, Elizabeth Cohen just staying on the escalating numbers and the superlatives, the 500,000 new COVID cases in the last 7 days, coupled with the fact that U.S. is averaging over 70,000 new cases per day. And Dr. Jha saying we are just weeks away from hitting 100,000 cases a day, which will be a really notable milestone. Adrian Broadus at the Milwaukee Field Hospital, and then Jim and Poppy do have a doctor in Madison on the front lines of the disaster. Wisconsin just reported a record number of deaths yesterday. We do have Denver's mayor. They are about to put in more restrictions, and Brianna has an infectious disease specialist of one of the biggest hospital groups in Utah, where he says the strain is overwhelming, morale is very low, and doctors and nurses are already emotionally spent, and they haven't even reached the apex yet. We'll be looking at those new lockdowns that could potentially happen in Europe. We have NPW's piece inside the United Kingdom ICU, and we are watching the stock markets. Jamie Gangel, the new Bob Woodward sound with Jared Kushner, she's going to join John King at noon. We will watch the tech hearing today. Donia Sullivan up around that to call out the political theater that it is. And finally, some Amber Walker hits in New Orleans as Louisiana braces for yet another hurricane.
Okay. Thank you, John. Washington?
Morning. At 3 o'clock, we've also got Jeremy in Bullhead City, Arizona. With the president, we have Biden reporters as well. We'll see what the vice president says today. Speaking of Arizona, Kyung looks at the rapidly changing political demographics in Maricopa County. Should be interesting there. Also, Elizabeth Cohen continues our daily look at policy differences between the candidates, looking today at how they're handling the pandemic. They promised to. Nick Watt with a COVID wrap. We've got both Dr. Ashish Jha and Dr. Craig Spencer in our hours today. Governor Phil Murphy also, as Newark is near lockdown again. David Chalian mentioned the new poll at 4. We've got Nia Malika at Gloria. And, of course, Caitlin with a piece at 4. Sanjay. Pamela Brown has our voting wrap piece today. And Tom Rage will join Jake. And, of course, we've got to watch Hurricane Zeta with Amara Walker in New Orleans and forecast, and we'll keep an eye on the markets as well.
And in the Situation Room, we'll be tying all of the threads together 1 week from the morning after, where we likely won't know the results of the election, with votes still being counted. All of this as we continue to piece together the road to 270 in our wall hits. We'll follow Trump in Arizona today as the virus is back with a vengeance and consuming his campaign. And we'll hit this outrageous claim out of the White House that they're listing ending the pandemic as one of their accomplishments. We'll also be watching Biden in Wilmington at noon, and we'll be following these record early voting numbers, now surpassing 50% of the 2016 electorate. And we'll get into the deeper threads with our Pam Brown voting route piece. We'll also continue with our reporter whips out of these battleground states. And we'll be then obviously hitting the public health side of Corona, the deepening crisis, 40 states now trending in the wrong direction, deaths up, some of the highest days of cases ever, as well as these Giroir comments contradicting Meadows and Trump, saying the virus can be controlled and that the numbers are up and not because of testing. So we'll get out into all of that with our doctors. We've got the Nick Watt rap piece. We also have Jamie Gangel on the Woodward reporting, and we'll just keep an eye on the hurricane.
Okay. Thank you very much, Emily. Anybody else have anything they want to bring up?
Jeff, I just had a couple of political things. I just wanted to ask David, have they made like tons of adjustments to how exit polling is doing this year, since on election day it could be with the whole red mirage scenario?
Well, two different things there, but our exit polls are going to be representative of everyone that voted. So there has been an increase in conducting exit polls with in-person voters. That's been going on for the last couple weeks in key states with in-person exit polls. Also, just like previously, you know, when there's been a state with very high absentee or mail vote percentage of their overall vote, the exit poll is a pre-election telephone survey, a massive one. That is now everywhere. We have exit polls is supplemented in addition to is supplemented with this huge pre-election telephone survey. And of course, in-person exit polling in a COVID-safe way, which has been tested throughout the primary season. Exit polling, the consortium was able to test out how to do that and found that it can be done successfully. So the exit polls are, I mean, the way in which we conduct exit polls is as we have done, but yes, it's been adjusted and made more robust in terms of making sure that it is representative of the electorate, irrespective of the method of voting.
Cool, thank you. And the other, I'm just going to make a point about some of the early numbers that I saw last week. I haven't seen any updates this week, but we're showing a pretty massively high percentage of young voters as well as African-American voters. And I just think that one of the things we shouldn't overlook is if that stuff holds, I mean, an awful lot about the decisiveness of this election could be attributed to race as much as to COVID, especially if young people vote. I think that could be an important topic.
Well, we're just going to have to see what happens when we see the votes. Any other thoughts?
Hey Jeff, I just want to follow up on the how to vote thing earlier. Props to Allison Gauss for sending me the link to our, of course, excellent voter guide online, and just push to that when you can to remind people how they can just click on their state and know immediately. It's perfectly laid out as to what you need to know about voting in any area that you live in the country. So it's a fantastic guide, and we should be pushing to that when we can.
Okay, so that's where I was going to end. So I have two notes, one on that and one on podcast. So again, to Michael's point from Allison, which is it's at CNN.com, the 2020 voter guide, which will give you all the information you need to know about deadlines and where you should vote and where to bring your ballots and all of that. CNN.com 2020 voter guide. I would like to make sure we're pushing to that. In addition, I want to make sure that everybody is aware that we recently launched 3 new political podcasts. CNN Political Briefing, which is hosted by David Chalian, is a quick daily wrap-up of the top political headlines of the day. Politically Sound, hosted by David Chalian and Nia Malika Henderson, analyzes the week's biggest political stories. And Election 101, which is hosted by Kristen Holmes, is a weekly explainer series to drill down into different topics. So these 3 new political podcasts, along with the Axe Files and The Point from Chris Cillizza, have really allowed us to put a marker in the ground and position us as a true industry leader, in political coverage in audio. And so it would be good to help push those as well. So we've got a lot going on. There's a tremendous amount of content across the board. And so my final reminder is in our coverage on both television and in digital, let's go with the news, be newsy, be urgent. Let's be looking forward. The story is the road to 270 and how the map gets us there. And let's stay focused on that. I don't care if we've done it. And I do want to end where David Chalian began at the big picture. It all comes back to this is the coronavirus election, and neither candidate can get away from that. And the list of accomplishments out of the White House for ending the pandemic is the thing that we really need to blast today. Have a good day, everybody. Yes, ma'am.
Jeff, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I just want to make sure that the URL for the voter guide is not CNN.com/2020 voter guide. It's more simple than that. It's just CNN.com/vote. That takes you to the voter guide. So I just wanted to correct that.
Great. I wasn't meaning to give out the URL. So I just meant it was at CNN.com. But yes, thank you for that. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.